For years, everyone in my hometown believed I had disappeared. My parents told relatives, neighbors, and even old family friends that they had no idea where I was. Some believed I had run away. Others thought something terrible had happened to me, but there was one detail nobody knew. I hadn't disappeared at all. I had simply stopped sending money home. And when my older brother finally tracked me down, he knocked on my door, looked past me, and suddenly went completely pale. He backed away down the steps with his phone pressed against his ear and whispered, "Mom, you need to see this." What he discovered inside that house would expose a secret my parents had kept buried for 4 years. My name is Daniel, and 4 years ago, I made what I thought was a simple decision. I stopped sending money to my parents. At the time, I was 32 years old and working 2 jobs just to keep myself afloat. Every month, almost every dollar I earned seemed to disappear into bills, rent, groceries, and money I sent back home. My parents always had a new reason. The electricity bill was overdue, the roof needed repairs, my father needed medication, my mother needed help with the house, and every time I hesitated, my mother would say the same thing. "Daniel, you're our son. Family takes care of family." So I kept sending money, month after month, year after year, until one evening, I looked at my bank account and realized I had almost nothing left. I called my mother and told her I couldn't send anything that month. There was silence on the phone. Then she said something I'll never forget. "If you stop helping us, don't expect us to be here when you need us." I thought she was angry. I didn't realize it was a warning. The following week, I stopped answering their calls. Not because I hated them, because I needed time to think. I found a small apartment several hours away, changed my phone number, and started rebuilding my life. I didn't tell many people where I was. I wanted peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't constantly worried about the next emergency. I got a better job. I made friends. I started saving money. And slowly, I began feeling like myself again. But when I eventually contacted an old family friend, I discovered something strange. She asked me why I had never told anyone that I was leaving. I said, "What do you mean?" She became quiet. Then she said, "Daniel, your parents told everyone you disappeared." I laughed because I thought she was joking. But she wasn't. According to my parents, I had suddenly vanished. They said I had stopped contacting them. They said they had no idea where I was. They even told people they feared I might have gotten into serious trouble. I couldn't understand it. They knew exactly why I had left. They knew I was alive. They knew where I had been working. So why were they telling everyone I had disappeared? I decided not to confront them. Instead, I stayed away. For years past, I built a completely different life. Then one cold Saturday morning, someone knocked on my apartment door. 3 knocks. Slow. Careful. I opened the door, and there stood my older brother, Michael. I hadn't seen him in years. He looked exhausted. He stared at me without saying a word. Then he looked past my shoulder into the apartment. His face suddenly changed. He went pale. "Daniel?" he whispered. "What are you doing here?" He didn't answer. Instead, he took a step backward, then another. He pulled out his phone and called our mother. I could hear her voice through the speaker. Michael looked at me and said, "Mom, you need to see this." I had no idea what he meant. Then he asked me one question. "Who is the old man living with you?" I turned around, and suddenly, everything changed, because sitting in my living room was the reason my parents had told everyone I had disappeared. An elderly man sat quietly in a chair near the window. His hands were shaking. His eyes were fixed on the floor. Michael stared at him. Then he looked back at me. "Daniel, where did you find him?" I took a deep breath. 4 years ago. Michael's expression became even more confused. I explained everything. The night I left home, I had been driving on a dark highway when I saw an elderly man standing beside a broken-down car. Nobody had stopped. I pulled over. He was confused and frightened. He didn't know where he was. He couldn't remember his address. I called for help, but the situation became complicated. Eventually, I learned that he had been living alone and had almost nobody left. I couldn't simply abandon him, so I helped him. At first, it was supposed to be temporary. A few days became weeks. Weeks became months. And eventually, he became like family. I had never told my parents about him, not after everything that happened. Michael listened silently. Then he asked, "Do you know who he is?" I nodded. "Yes." Michael's eyes filled with tears. "Daniel, that's Dad's older brother." I froze. I looked at the old man. He slowly raised his head, and then he said my name. "Daniel?" My heart stopped. He remembered me, but there was something else, something much worse. He knew what my parents had done. He told us that years earlier, my parents had been receiving money from several family members, money they claimed was being used to support the family. But much of that money never went where they said it did. My uncle had discovered the truth. He had confronted them. After that, my parents stopped speaking to him, and when I finally stopped sending money, they needed another story. So they told everyone I had disappeared. They wanted people to believe I had abandoned the family, because admitting the truth would mean admitting why I had really left. Michael sat down. He looked devastated, for years he had believed his parents. He had believed that his younger brother had simply vanished. And now he was sitting inside my apartment, hearing the truth from the very person they had claimed was missing. But there was one final piece. Michael opened his phone. He showed me messages from our mother. She had been telling him for years that I was dangerous, that I had become selfish, that I didn't want anything to do with the family. And then Michael showed me one message that made my stomach turn. It said, "Don't look for Daniel. If he wanted to come home, he would." Michael looked at me. Then he said, "I spent for years thinking you didn't want us." I didn't know what to say, because the truth was, I had spent for years thinking they didn't want me. That afternoon, Michael stayed for hours. We talked about everything we had missed. The birthdays, the holidays, the family gatherings, the years that could never be returned. Before he left, he stood at the door and looked at me. "I don't know if I can forgive them," he said. I looked at him and replied, "You don't have to forgive anyone today." He nodded. Then he looked toward the old man sitting quietly in the living room. And for the first time in 4 years, my brother smiled. I had spent years believing that leaving my family meant I had lost everything. But that day, I realized something. Sometimes walking away isn't abandonment. Sometimes it's survival. And sometimes the people who tell everyone you've disappeared are the very people who are afraid someone will discover why you left. I never disappeared. I simply stopped allowing myself to be used. And when the truth finally came knocking on my door, I was ready to answer it.